praise him. We have Dr. Malik Raheem, and just so you know, he has his lovely assistant in the back, his son, and he is taping his presentation this evening, so we are being recorded as part of the presentation. Dr. Raheem is an assistant professor in the Counselor Education and Rehab Department at California State University, Fresno, with a focus in the Student Affairs College Counseling Program. Dr. Raheem was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, one of my favorite cities. He attended Chicago State University, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a Master of Arts in Community Counseling. He has experience working in hospital and community agency settings. He worked for over 4 years at River Edge Hospital, the largest psychiatric hospital in Illinois. He worked for several years with an organization named One Hope United. He specialized in counseling adolescents, adults, families, couples, and groups. He was an adjunct lecturer at Chicago State University for 4 years, and in 2012 he completed the requirements for his doctorate in counselor education and supervision from Northern Illinois University. His research interests include ethnic and racial identity development, racial microaggressions, multiculturalism in counselor education, counseling Muslims, and mental health issues with people of African descent. So you can welcome Dr. Raheem.
I'll get that introduction. Man, I want to hear him too. Wow.
We're all wondering how you ended up in Fresno.
This is perfect. Well, before I get started, interesting story about how I ended up in Fresno. They tricked me. Yeah, they tricked me.
Near the ocean.
Not exactly. See, the thing about it is this. When I came down here for the interview, it was in 2012. It was March. So you can imagine what the weather was like in Chicago. So when I came here, I'm like, palm trees, really? Wow, you can't let a person who work 4 years on their doctorate just as an adjunct that's broke think they're gonna have palm trees all the time, right? So I'm walking around, they telling me, well, the only issue here in Fresno, it gets hot, right? And I'm like, if you ever met anyone from Chicago, we're a very conceited bunch. Very, very conceited bunch. So anything you say about, what's going on, if it doesn't have nothing to do with Chicago, the first thing we say is, yeah, but it's not like Chicago, right? So when they say it get hot, I'm like, well, it don't get humid like Chicago. It ain't like Chicago. Yeah. I'm like, oh, it get hot? Yeah. So after the dean called me and offered me the position, I said, okay, cool. So in May, my son and I came down to look for an apartment. And we got here, it was warm, but it was warm in Chicago. It didn't feel any different. After we found the apartment, we went back after I did all the final stuff of defending my dissertation. We came back in August so I could prepare for classes, right? Now, by the time they offered me the position, it was too late for him to get into Fresno State, so he had to go to Fresno City, but he likes it. He said, oh, it's a great school. And I found out that that's usually the path that Californians take. Go to the community college, save some money, take care of their general electives, and go to the universities. So I'm like, cool. So anyway, we get out here, and we're walking around, because I didn't have a car yet. So like where I lived, we was walking to the Walmart, right? And we're walking down to the Walmart, and we're walking, and I'm like, man, these people talking about it's hot. We laughing and joking, it's like hot. So my son, we all family here. We all family, okay? And the thing about it is that these children, they have these smartphones. And these smartphones, they do all kinds of things. So I say, I tell him, Pat, what's the temperature? He looks at it, and we just walking all fine and all this stuff. He says, 108. All of a sudden, the sweat started coming down. I'm walking around, and all these people in Fresno just walking around smiling. And I'm thinking, what the heck are y'all smiling about? It's 2 degrees below hell. Right? So that's how I say I got tricked. When they said it was hot, they didn't tell me it was hell hot. They just told me hot, right? So, but no, they offered me the position, and I'm quite excited to be here. A little thing about my presentation is this. I want to take a different angle when I want to talk about intimate partner violence or domestic violence in the African American community. We can go over stats for days. And the thing about stats is this, it's so depressing. So I said, you know what, I'm not gonna focus on the stats, but I'm gonna focus on the culture and why, unfortunately, intimate partner violence is so prevalent in the African American community, and what some of the things that we can do and you all can do as future and current mental health professionals to address the issues, right? One of the biggest myths in society, and it's not really totally a myth, but it kind of contributes to the whole concept of intimate partner violence in the African American community, is the resilient, strong African American woman, right? But the truth of it is this: all women are strong. All women are resilient.
Amen, brother.
Thank you, sir. Just preach to the choir. Just preach to the choir. There you go. But the thing about it is this: because of our history of what we did, and you could go through every human ethnic family's history and see how the woman has held the society together. While the men was out there acting like fools by having war, the woman was sitting down being realistic and saying, you know what, we can't do that kind of crazy stuff. So when everybody said that there wouldn't be no wars if it was women, they probably right. But one of the myths is this: is the strong African American woman is one of the things that makes it so historically, one of the reasons why, and in this presentation I'm gonna make an argument on one of the reasons intimate partner violence is so epidemic in the African American community, right? I don't like to read to people, okay? So like, I'm just gonna just speak freely. So like if you say, well, that ain't what the slide says, don't panic, okay? But I don't like to read to people because I like to do presentations like, when I'm sitting down watching a presentation, I don't want the person to read to me because I feel that's kind of demeaning. I can read for myself, okay? So I'm just gonna throw that out there. So what makes the African American woman historically so much of a target when it comes to intimate partner violence? And those are some of the things I want to discuss. But before I do that, we need to define some things. And when you define some things, that clarify on what we're actually talking about, okay? As you can see, the definition of domestic violence is physical, emotional, and psychological violence occurring between two members of the domestic household. So technically, that can contribute to brothers and sisters, to siblings. It can contribute to cousins. It can contribute to a whole lot of things. But with intimate partner violence, it's talking about not only the emotional and psychological or physical abuse, but the sexual abuse that take place between two intimate partners. Okay? So when I received the email requesting to come out here, because that's a funny story within itself, but when I received the email, I said, you know, what would be different than just focusing on just domestic violence, because that's a big range. So I wanted to try to focus it down. So I focused it down to intimate partner violence. Okay? So for this discussion, I'm going to be focusing mostly on intimate partner violence. Okay? Because to me, domestic violence carries a big umbrella. Okay? So one of the first things I did was this. I was like, ooh, the Marjorie Mason Center. Let me find out more about it. So I did the history search on what the Marjorie Mason Center really was. And I almost fell out of my seat crying when I heard the story. Right? And I said, well, that is the reason this is so important, right? Because see, the thing about it is this, if you don't know the story, I'm sure everyone does, she was killed by her deputy sheriff boyfriend, right? And the thing about it is like, just like in a lot of domestic violence situations, where it just escalate, you try to leave. But the problem was with this, he had more power than the average intimate partner because of his position. So it's like, I was like, wow. That's another reason I don't want to focus too much on stats, okay? Because of her loving memory, I wanted to talk about some of the historical context that contribute to the cultural context of African American and intimate partner violence. But quick stats real quick. 29% of African American women, and yes, 12% of African American men reported at least one instance of violence from intimate partners. That was in 1996. All the way back then. So I'm sure the numbers are different now. But what this is saying to me is this. While African American men also are victims of intimate partner violence, unfortunately, the woman is the one that's most likely to be injured or killed. Okay? If you look at the stats, you'll see that African Americans make up a disproportionate number of intimate partner violent homicides. So, as a counselor, one of the things I want to see is why? What's going on in the culture that create this type of atmosphere? Quick history lesson. The transatlantic slave trade, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you a secret, okay? It was a horrifying event, okay? What happened is, a lot of individuals of African descent was run from Africa and run to not only America, but the West Indies, the Caribbean, Latin America, and their identity was stripped, their name was stripped, their religion was stripped, their culture was stripped, and they were implanted with a new culture, a new way of life, a new way of thinking, right? And that carried on all the way through the black codes and the Jim Crow law. And in the black codes and the Jim Crow law, the thing about it is this. During that time, you would have never seen me in a place like this. Okay? You would have never seen me in a place like this. As a matter of fact, with me looking at some of you all, I probably would have been hung. I probably would have been beaten. And if you don't believe me, look up the name Emmett Till. Okay? He was only accused of whistling at a white woman. But that's the most famous name. There's a lot of names out there that have not even been made famous. Right? So can you think of, as a man, during slavery, you're supposed to be a man, an African warrior. You get a woman that you say you're supposed to protect, and you can't even take care of her. You can't even protect your children. At any time, somebody can come and sell them. At any time, you can lose your family. At any time, the master can come and have sex with your wife or your woman. So how did the woman look at the man? How did the man look at the woman? And then during Black Crow and Jim Crow line, you couldn't even look in the eyes of a white person. You couldn't say nothing to someone who was white without saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and looking down or looking away. Can you imagine the psychological effect that had and was just carried on for generations and generations. Then the big event happened. Civil rights movement and the Black Power movement, right? They're a little different. The civil rights movement, historically you can make suggestions on when it actually started, but the main contributors of the civil rights movement are individuals like Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X. The Black Power movement, on the other hand, you can make arguments, although it was the Black Power movement, you can also make arguments that it was also the black masculinity movement, right? Media images. I have a son. And one of the things, when he was growing up, I had to monitor the things that he watched. Because of the psychological effect it could have on how he was going to view women. And we're going to discuss that a little later. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. There's a psychological theory out there that the effects of slavery is still going on psychologically through African Americans through some of the behaviors that we're doing, right? Not to spill too many cultural secrets, but one of the problems that a lot of African Americans say among each other is we can't even all get along. We can't even work together. As soon as one person trying to make steps ahead, you look back and say, look at that Uncle Tom, just selling out. What are they doing? Or you'll do something to try to trip them up. Internalized racism is when you internalize the stereotypical images that are portrayed about your culture and you internalize them to yourself, to where you have a sense of self-hatred. My sisters, throughout history, have been given stereotypical images in the media. And the four most prevailing stereotypical images of the African American female are Jezebel. And the Jezebel is not someone, I have a young man in the room, so I'm not going to use that word. But a Jezebel is not someone who has sex with everyone. No. A Jezebel is someone who uses her sexuality as a weapon. Right? So if you look at all the females that are in the media now, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, even the little Kim ain't really current anymore. That's showing how old I am. What's the other sister's name? Give me.
Lil' Kim's kinda there.
Lil' Kim's the other. Rihanna.